This is Murder in the Black with Steph and M.D.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
So we have no announcements, so let's get right into it.
Right. So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, and your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it.
All right. So we have a little bit of something new to get into. So today's episode is entitled A Twist in the Tale, and we're going to dive deep into a intriguing true crime story. This week, we deviate from the usual as we unravel a case that defies expectations. Typically, by the mid-episode, you guys are true crime sleuths, so you have an idea of who the culprit is. And if you're anything like the person last week who dipped into the pool and actually looked up who it was, girl, I feel you. Sometimes you just gotta
know. You just gotta know.
But in this instance, things might not be as straightforward. While the perpetrator may be identified early on, the real question revolves around who is truly at fault, providing an unexpected twist that will captivate your attention. So join us as MD and I embark on a gripping journey right on down to Georgia, where the intricacies of this case will challenge your assumptions. Instead of our regular takeaway segment, we invite you to put on your detective hat, grab your crime journal, yes indeed, or simply snuggle up for a narrative that will keep you on the edge of your seat. So stay tuned for an episode filled with suspense, unexpected revelations, and a thought-provoking exploration of the human psyche. Let's get into A Twist in the Tale.
Okay, so Queensha Johnson was a Philly native, but she moved to Lithonia, Georgia. And am I saying that right, Steph?
Lithonia? You are. I mean, that's how I say it, Lithonia.
Lithonia, Georgia. She moved there in 2021. Now, she was a mother of 4 and a behavioral health technician. Now, the incident that we're going to talk about that happened in November 2022. So everything that we're going to build you up to happened prior to and then after November 2022. So prior to this incident, Queensha started dating a guy named Devonte Smith. Devonte and Queensha had a baby together during their relationship, and about 30 days before November 2022, he moved in with Queensha. Now, Devonte moved in because he was going through a rough patch legally and financially, and he really didn't have nowhere else to go.
Yeah, but she was, trying to help him get on his feet.
Right, it's her boo, it's her man. So she was like, her man and her baby daddy. So she was like, come on, you can live with me. And now outside of his child with Queensha, he was also a father to 3 children of his own. And he was recently released from prison on a felony charge. Now, Steph, I don't know exactly what that felony charge was. Do you? Do you know what it was?
No, it wasn't communicated in the research that I saw. So yeah,
but he did. He was recently released from prison for a felony charge. Now, once they moved in together, they began to kind of have some domestic disputes. They began to fight, bicker, the whole 9. And in fact, according to published reports, they would publicly share their disagreements on none other than social media. You know how we do. You mad at your boo. You leave like some passive aggressive comments and messages on Facebook. Now, Devonte, he would threaten to cause her physical harm. And unfortunately, on November 6th, these threats came a little bit more than just verbal. When he threw her, let me take that back. He slammed her on the ground and hit her. Now, 2 weeks after that incident, on November 26th, some of her friends had invited Queensha out to spend the evening at a nightclub for a birthday party for one of her friends. And she was really looking forward to it because not only had this incident happened and she just needed a break, a reprieve from Demonte, but she was also 2 months postpartum. So she was just wanting to get out, not be tied down. You know how it is. As if you're a mother, you remember how it just felt to just need a break from all the touches and all the needs and all the wants of your children. You just want to remember what it feels like to just be you and in your body. And so that's what she was looking forward to. So Queensha left her children with Demonte, and she told him, I'm going to return probably around 6 a.m. Like, I plan to be outside. So, let me go out. I'm going to have a good time with my girls. And they agreed that this was fine. But at some point in the night, she and her friends got into kind of a little bit of an altercation, a shouting match, if you will, with some other people at the nightclub. So like most girlfriends do, she hit up her boo. She let him know, like, I just want you to know, like, we got into like a little bit of a shouting match with some people here at the club. Here's my location, just so in case something happens, I want you to know where I am and what happened. And so he becomes kind of just on alert, right? He becomes, as rightfully so, you just want to make sure you're just alert to, is everything okay? And so when a couple of hours pass by and he hasn't heard from her, he, texts her, and then she doesn't respond. And so then he calls her and she doesn't respond. And now her phone is going straight to voicemail. So he is super concerned because the last thing he heard from her was, hey, I got into this shouting match, this altercation, and he doesn't know if she's okay. So he takes it a step further because now his worry is turning into anger. I don't quite understand that, but it did. It started to turn into anger. So he calls her aunt to just say, hey, I haven't been able to get in contact with Queensha. Have you heard from her? This is the last news that I heard from her, so I'm just concerned. So the aunt's like, no, I haven't. I'm going to try her. The aunt reaches out. The aunt also can't get in contact with her. So between the aunt and Demonte, they start calling hospitals. They start doing everything to try to look what anybody would do if they thought that their loved one was missing. And none of their attempts to find her panned out. However, a few hours later, around 6 a.m., she calls her aunt. She picks her phone up, charges her phone, because in fact, it wasn't that she was just avoiding Demonte or her aunt. Her phone had died. We've all been there. You out having a good time, your phone dies. So once she gets her phone charged, she recognizes, oh, I have all these calls, all these missed text messages. Let me call my aunt and let her know that I'm fine. So the aunt's like, okay, glad to hear that you're good. Let me three-way in Demonte to let him know that you're fine. So they all get on the call, and Demonte goes from, I'm glad you're okay, to, oh, I'm going to, and he literally says, and I quote, I'm going to beat your ass on Crip when you get home. Steph, can you explain to our MIB fam what you think on Crip means?
Well, I mean, on Crip is, first of all, Crip is a gang, right? So on Crip, on my mama, that basically means on gang, you gonna get your ass beat, pretty much. So he sends her that, well, he says that on the phone call. So not only does Queensha hear that, but so does the aunts. The aunts hear that, and the aunts are back in Philly, by the way. So, everybody hears this. And not only does he say this, but as she is charging her phone and hearing all of these verbal assaults, she also is getting a barrage of text messages by Demonte as well. And he's saying, I'm going to beat your ass. You're going to get your ass beat when you get home. And she is scared. Like, she is scared to go home because you have to know, like, just the day before, he just slammed her onto the ground and physically assaulted her just the day before. So she is absolutely petrified. So we're not sure how many hours go by before she decides to go back home, but she makes a 911 call to the 911 dispatcher, and she tells the 911 dispatcher that she needs a police escort, and she's on the way home. And so there is a loss of translation in this 911 call that's recorded. And so she's telling them the address, and the 911 dispatcher doesn't get the address right, and she ends up getting to the house before the police does, and the police calls and says, "Hey, I haven't made it to the house. Where are you?" And so she asks the police, please don't go, like, because I'm almost there. So long story short, like, she ends up calling the police back. They finally get there at the same time, and she tells the police, "Listen, I was out clubbing late last night. My baby's father is in the house at the same time, and I'm scared that he's going to physically assault me." What she doesn't tell police officers is that, one, that she was physically assaulted the day before. She just tells them that, he threatened her. And she doesn't show them the text messages from the night before or Demonte's criminal past, right? She doesn't tell them anything about that. So as she's telling them pretty much everything about the night's events, Demonte comes out of the house with their 2-month-old baby that they share together. And the 2-month-old baby is dressed only in a diaper, and he doesn't have on a shirt. And in Georgia at this time, it's November, so it's about 60 degrees, and she is angry. She's angry that the baby does not have on a shirt. And so they immediately get in an argument. Her and Demonte, they start arguing back and forth, and the police are trying to, de-escalate the situation, but it's really not going very well. And so the police asked Demonte, they said, "Hey, can you just, hand over the baby, just give the baby to Queensha?" And he immediately says no. He's like, "I'm not handing over the baby. Like, why? This is my child. I'm not going to do that. I don't have to. I'm not doing anything wrong to the baby." And that's when Queensha yells out what every Black man hates to hear. Now, MD, I want you to chime in on this, because in Black culture, we know, whether you be married or just have a baby father, they don't like to hear this. And Queensha yells out to Demonte. She says, "That's not even your baby," which he believed at the time. And we don't even know, we can't confirm. We still believe that this is his child, but we can't confirm this. She says, "You're not even on the birth certificate." And then she tells him, another insult to injury, "I'm going to disappear again for another 3 hours. What you going to do then?" What do you think about that, MD?
I think that she was antagonizing him because, like you said, in Black culture, that is one of those things. It goes to the, I don't know, Steph, if you have heard this quote, but mama's baby, daddy's maybe. And what that, when I think of that quote, I just think it's like, it's yours because obviously you had it, right? But you're telling me it's mine. I am really only forced to believe you that it's mine because I don't know unless I get a DNA test. So I'm out here doing for this baby, and even if because you got deadbeat daddies too, but even if you're not really doing nothing for the baby, I'm claiming this baby as mine because I'm believing you were faithful to me. I'm believing that you haven't let somebody else slide on in. If you get my drift,
right?
So therefore, it's a shot to the ego, right? It's a shot to the ego. It's a shot to the pride. Well, ego and pride, same thing. But it's a shot to your belief that this baby is truly yours. And it seemed like he really loved his baby. So now you telling me that this baby not mine?
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. I mean, and she did that in front of these officers, right? She did that in front of these officers. And so these officers, right, when you call police out to the scene, they're there to really observe and then act out on what the law has prescribed and defined for them to do. And so the police, they're trying to de-escalate this situation, which has now gotten increasingly hostile. So the police tell both of them, they say, hey, listen, I think that both of you just need to go in and settle down. That's what they advise both of them to do. And so the officers note in their notes as they, are writing their notes down, they addressed that Queensha was actually the aggressive one, not Demonte. He was not the aggressor. They said that she was the one who was extremely aggressive, and to her and to them, and by the picture that was painted, she was the aggressor. So officers tell them, hey, go into the house, cool off. And they were able to catch on their body cam some audio. And while I don't have that audio, I actually do have the transcript of the audio, and I will read that to you guys. So the deputy says to Queensha, do you need anything else? And Queensha says, he said, I'm going to beat your ass tonight. So if I shoot him, it's in self-defense. Then what? Because I'm licensed. So if I shoot him, I'm in residency because he's here putting his hands on me for the second time in 2 weeks, and I'm just going to kill him. So when I shoot him, unintelligible, deputy, if you think that you can articulate what's going on, Queensha, I can, I'm sure. You better really be able to articulate that, deputy. So Queensha says this to the deputy, basically trying to get herself armed for something, obviously, right? Like, she says this, the deputies go outside, and they don't immediately leave. They actually stay on the block. And it's not clear if they stay, like, right by her house, like they're parked right outside of her home, or if they just stay really close to her house, like they're parked right outside of her house. Suddenly, Queensha appears outside to retrieve a gun and a tire iron from her truck. Then she returns to her house. Moments later, we hear a gunshot. And Demonte then appears on a Ring camera, and he says to the deputy, who is still outside, because the deputy was still outside when Queensha came outside and retrieved her gun and the tire iron, and Demonte comes outside and the police are still outside. And he yells to the deputy, she hit me and she shot me. Hurry up before I die, bro. And then he lays on the ground. He was transported to the Emory Hollandale Medical Center, where he eventually succumbed to his wounds. What's so coincidental and just sad, to be quite honest, is that a few minutes after the ambulance arrives to transport Demonte to the hospital, is that an Uber pulls up to actually take Demonte from the house. He actually arranged an Uber to take him away from the house, to leave the scene. Like, he was trying to get away from the house. And sadly, it just came a couple of seconds too late. So officers were still there. They immediately took Queensha into custody. They booked her into DeKalb County, where she remained there without bond for multiple charges, including murder. Now, Queensha sought immunity under the Georgia Stand Your Ground law. They brought 4 witnesses, but she was denied that motion because she could not justify the Georgia stand your ground law. And it left her to defend herself for murder, for a jury trial. So on August 27th, 2022, she went up for trial. So, MD, you want to tell us a little bit about her trial and what took place?
So the question in this case at trial was not, did Queensha shoot Demonte? Did she kill him? That was not the question. The question was she justified in shooting him? And so initially the prosecution, charges her with first-degree murder, manslaughter, and second degree. So they have various charges against her. And the defense, they decide that they're going to try to use or invoke Georgia's stand your ground law. Now, stand your ground sounds, you probably are familiar. If you are a true crime sleuth, you probably are familiar with stand your ground laws. And a lot of states in the South specifically have these laws. We're probably most familiar with the Florida stand your ground law because it was tried in public courts with a very notorious case. I can't think of the name of the case off the top of my head. It's going to literally come to me at some point during this podcast, so I'll circle back. But we are familiar with it because it basically states, in general, without going into the specifics of Georgia, that when you are faced up against imminent threat, then reasonable force is permitted. So they decide, let's see if we can, that's what they believe that she did. They believed that she was in imminent danger. And so they wanted to try this defense at trial. Now, a key component of Georgia's stand your ground law basically states that when a person reasonably believes that they are in imminent danger or harm or death, they can stand their ground and defend themselves. They therefore do not have a duty to retreat, right? They don't have a duty to leave or a duty to try to find a way to escape. They can stand their ground and use whatever force, not whatever force, let's say reasonable force to defend themselves. Now, you need to, under Georgia's law, you have to try to avoid confrontation. You don't want to escalate. These are some of the things that are within the law itself that a judge is going to evaluate before they determine whether or not that law, the stand your ground law, can be invoked. Now, if the stand your ground law is invoked, if a judge decides that, yes, we can invoke the stand your ground law here, then she never even goes to trial. She never will even have a jury or a judge decide whether or not she's guilty or innocent, because it wouldn't be a matter of innocence or guilt. It would be a matter of her defending herself under the stand your ground law. So they go before the judge. They ask the judge, based on the evidence, can we invoke stand your ground? And the judge says, no, we cannot, because it did not appear to the judge that she did all that she could do to avoid confrontation. See, that's why that's essential. It's an essential component in the stand your ground law. It's not simply, I was defending myself. It's, I attempted to retreat. I attempted to de-escalate it. I attempted to avoid confrontation, and yet I couldn't. I was in imminent threat. I was in imminent danger, and I used a reasonable amount of force to defend myself. And so, according to the judge, he or she didn't believe that that was evidenced in this case. So now they go to trial, Steph. Now they go, and her fate now is in the hands of a jury. And At trial, the prosecution presents in their opening argument a very solid, what I believe is a very solid case, right? Like they lay this case out, and they immediately, which I think is brilliant as an attorney, admit to the weaknesses in their case, what most would believe are weaknesses. And the weaknesses that were very evident in this case is they had text messages where Demonte clearly states, I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to kick your butt. I am going to hurt you. Like they can't get around it. There's no point of shying away from it. So the prosecution owns that part of it. They're like, this is what it is. But when she did come to the home, she was the aggressor, right? This is what the prosecution is saying. They're saying, hey, she was the aggressor. And then not only that, when she went inside the home, before she went inside the home, she literally lays out to the police on record where you can hear it, and we're going to play the transcript for you, where she literally tells them what she's about to do. So if I shoot him, I can get away with it because it'll be self-defense, because he already told me he's going to beat me up. And so she thought, because she didn't understand the full totality of the law, that if simply him saying he was going to hurt her was enough to invoke the stand your ground law. It wasn't. So he says, so she thought she was justified in being able to go inside, come back out, thoughtfully grab the tire iron, thoughtfully grab the gun, go inside, tell her daughter or her child to call 911 and tell 911 that he hit me. And then she takes the tire iron, and she hits him on the head. And then she takes her gun and she shoots him in the chest. And then she says, bye, bye. And you'll be able to hear all of this, says the prosecution. You'll be able to hear all of this in her own words because we have it recorded. So, once you hear that, you're like, wow, okay. If I was a juror, I would be saying, she's guilty. Let's go. But then the defense gets up, and the defense says, yeah, it's not as black and white as you guys want to think that it is.
And by the way, I just thought this was a cool little tidbit. Her defense attorney is Michael Sterling, who is top model diva Eva's ex-husband.
Oh, okay, yeah. That sure is. He sure is.
So, you can actually watch all of this on Court TV. So if you're a real sleuth like me, you can watch all of this
stuff pull it up.
On Court TV.
See him. He's there.
Yeah, he's there.
Yes. And he did an excellent job. I think he did a particularly excellent job coming off the heels of what I believe was a very good, solid opening statement from the prosecution. And he comes on and he immediately says, it's not as black and white as you guys want to believe that it is. Yes, she did walk outside and get that tire iron. And yes, she did grab that gun because she was in fear for her life. So she was thinking, I'm getting this gun, I'm getting this tire iron, because if he does try to body slam me again, if he does try to hit me again, I'm going to be ready. This time he's not going to catch me off guard. I know what he's capable of because I just experienced this 2 weeks prior. I know what this man can do. I've lived with him. And not only that, but I said what I said on to the police because I really was trying to figure out how I can keep myself safe. And they're just sending me right back on into the lion's den with this lion, who I know is a lion. And he approached her, he ran toward her, and without thought, without consideration, I grabbed the tire iron and I hit him, and then I blacked out and I shot him. And so, yes, you do hear her saying bye, bye, but she don't even remember that. Because she had blacked out, because she went into flight, fear, what is it? Fear of flight, or what is it?
Fight.
Yeah, I'm like fear or flight. She went into fight or flight mode. He did an amazing job invoking those emotions, which is what the defense is supposed to do, right? They're supposed to really pull on those heartstrings, and he did. And so now what seemed to be a black and white case became really gray. And so they go forward, and the prosecution, it's their case in chief, and it's their duty. And I've said this to you guys before, but I haven't said it in a while. It's their duty to prove without a shadow of a doubt, okay? Not without a shadow of a doubt, but it's their duty to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that she was not justified in pulling the trigger. It's not the defense's burden. So the prosecution goes on and they bring on witnesses. The prosecution, MIB fam, and Steph, they bring on the ex-girlfriend. So Steph told y'all at the end of the story that an Uber driver was called to the scene to pick up Demonte to remove him from the scene. Well, that Uber driver was called by Demonte's ex-girlfriend. During the time that they had went back into the house, he texted his ex-girlfriend and was like, listen, me and my girl, we're over here fighting and it's escalated. The police are outside. I need to get away, but I don't have money to get away. So can you call the Uber driver for me and just bring me to your house? And she's like, yeah, for sure. So she's the one that called the Uber. So the prosecution is bringing her on to establish that set of facts, right? And in the line of questioning, the prosecution asks, what do you know about Demonte? Tell us about his character. Was he a good guy? Was he, genuine? What do you know about him?
So before you answer that, what would be the reason to ask that question? So
I think the reason that the prosecution asked, my only logical explanation, because honestly, I think it's a very dumb thing that they asked it. So, but the only thing that I can conclude is they asked the question because they wanted to establish that Demonte was not this abuser that maybe they were assuming the defense was going to paint him out to be. So they were probably trying to get ahead of what they assumed the defense was going to say about Demonte's character. But here's the thing. When you bring in character evidence, so character evidence is admissible. It is admissible. But under certain exceptions. But it is admissible to bring in character evidence. But when you do, specifically when the state does about the victim, then they open the door to that person's history. They open the door to everything about that person. So you can do it, but do it for the right person. If you know that your victim has a questionable past, or if you know that there's some facts in your victim's history that you don't want the jury to be aware of, then you don't want to open this character evidence door. It's a no-no. And Steph, was there a reason to not open this door?
Absolutely.
What was the reason?
He had a criminal background. He was an abuser.
Right, and it's documented.
Yeah.
Not just you're an abuser, but like they have police records of this man being an abuser, a domestic abuser. He has a criminal record. He was in jail for a felony. All of that now gets to come in.
Right.
And now the prosecution's not going to bring it in, but you better believe that on cross-examination of that particular witness, they brought all that in. And Eva's husband, he's smart. And he absolutely capitalized on that. I mean, I can just imagine him sitting in the courtroom, wanting to jump out of his seat like,
yippee!
Y'all asked that question?
You did that. You really opened that door. Huh?
You really did that? And they absolutely did that. And it was a slam dunk. It was one of those, we just took a big win, for the defense side. So fast forward, they continue to go throughout the trial. And then when it's now the defense's side, and the defense, they don't really have a lot of witnesses to call. They have a few. But he surprisingly calls Queensha. Now, this is always a very difficult, I never say it's right or wrong, because it's always a very difficult decision. More likely than not, attorneys do not want to put their witness on the stand because there's just certain things that will never come into trial but for the witness being on the stand. However, those things can go good or bad. Like certain things that may be really good for you would never come in because the witness didn't go on trial. But also, you are subjecting your witness, your defendant, your client to cross-examination. And you better believe that the prosecution is ready to attack the defendant. The prosecution is salivating at the opportunity to cross-examine the defendant. More likely than not, though, they don't put the defendant on the witness stand because no matter how much you prep a person, you are just not ready for a really good attorney to cross-examine you. And so Queensha goes up and she tells her story. And she does a brilliant job telling her story, invoking emotion in the proper ways when her attorney is examining her, which she should because they had probably prepped her till she was blue in the face. But she was not ready for cross-examination of the prosecution. Ultimately, he was able to ask her questions that really just kind of made her look dumb. Some of the questions that he asked her was, if you were in such fear of Demonte, not just after he told you he was going to beat you up, but even because she, in her examination, said, I was in fear of him ever since the incident happened that he threw me on the ground. I was in complete fear. I lived in fear. I was extremely nervous. And so he asked her on cross-examination, if you were in so much fear, why would you ever leave your two-month-old child in his care? And not just your 2-month-old, but your other kids too. And not just for a couple of hours, but you went out all night. Phone died and you wasn't in a rush to get it charged. But you were in so much fear. And so like, while you and I can sit here and say, yeah, it's possible for her to be in that much fear and still leave her kid. Like we can sit here and say, that makes sense. But you got to understand the jury is sitting there going, yeah, that's kind of crazy. Why would you do that? And then, then the prosecution asked, now you were in so much fear. Why would you go inside and talk to this man? You were in so much fear. Why did you not grab your kids and walk out? You were in so these are the questions that the prosecution is hitting her with. What they're doing is they don't want her answer. We don't care what her answer is. Those questions now, which would never have been asked, are now open to the jury to make interpretations about. Now the jury's saying exactly what the judge said that ruled against the stand your ground. Now the jury's saying, yeah, like, why did you not ask your aunt to come meet you at the house and get your kids and leave? Why did you not ask the police to walk in with you? So now the jury is thinking of all of the ways that she could have avoided confrontation. Why did you go out and get your gun and your tire arm instead of just going in and grabbing your kids and getting them in the car and putting a seatbelt on them and driving off? Why did you do why were the decisions that you made? It doesn't matter what your answers are because a reasonable person, what would a reasonable person, that's the question, would a reasonable person be justified in shooting this person based upon the facts of this case? And Steph, can you tell us what the reasonable jury decided? Well, let me not say reasonable jury. What the jury decided.
Oh, what was the
verdict?
Mm-hmm. Well, they did not say that it was malice. They convicted her and said that it was manslaughter. So they said, we don't think that she did it intentionally. Right.
But we do think that she was not justified in shooting him. And so therefore we convict her of, negligently shooting this guy. And so she was found guilty of manslaughter. And that was subjected to, I think, as little as how many years? To 25 years. It was 20. 25 years was the max. 20 years was like the max that she could receive. But the judge, and so the prosecution, she had been out on parole she was out, not on parole. She was out on bond during her trial. And so the prosecution, after she was found guilty, asked that she be remanded. And the judge said, no,
thank you.
I'm going to let her stay out on bond and she can report. And then when she was sentenced, she was sentenced to
well, she was sentenced. Okay, so the judge it was 20 years, but it was to be divided between 10 years of incarceration and 10 years probation. Of her confinement, 5 years were to be spent in prison and the remaining to be spent under house arrest. And the state asked for her to immediately be, as MD just said, to be locked up, but the judge said no and granted her an appeal bond. So she's still on appeal right now because this just happened in 2023. And she'll be under house arrest while her attorney, Michael Sterling, challenges her conviction.
And so until she gets a final ruling on the appeal, on her appeals, until she exhausts her appeals, let's be clear. And I just want to say that the appeal time can take 3 to 5 years. I mean, it could take. It's not like, oh, it's a quick turnaround. I like walked in and within a year I get a decision. It can be that quick, but the courts are backed up. 2020 did a number on the courts and everything is backed up. And so if your case is not emergent, you believe it will go to the back of the list. And so it's very likely that she could spend her first 10 years or close to the first 10 years, maybe 3 to 5 years on house arrest. Now, granted, it's still house arrest, but it just doesn't seem justified. So before we go into the takeaway step, I kind of want to just analyze the case because those are the facts of the case. And we can get to the takeaways quick, get there soon. But I think that the MIB fam deserve to kind of just get our thoughts on what we think is interesting about this case.
Right. And I think today, kind of what I said at the front is that this case really it's not takeaway. It doesn't have a true takeaway. Like, I think this is just one of those cases where we have to go a little bit more in depth. Y'all get a little bit more sauce. You know what I'm saying? So, but I mean, honestly, this case for me was such a doozy. So, I mean, initially, like, it was super straightforward, right? Like, you know exactly what happened. But I do think that Queensha, my initial thoughts were, on face value, I think Queensha was just caught up, her and Demonte, because I want to speak of this in totality. I don't want to separate Queensha and Demonte. I want to put it together because I think we can separate it. I think they were just caught up in a very toxic relationship, and they found each other and they were seasonal. They were never meant to be like a lifetime partnership. It was seasonal and they needed to break up. They needed to break up and they probably were about to. But, it was so many times in this partnership, relationship, whatever you call it, where on November 27th, I wanted somebody to go the extra mile for them, right? Like the girlfriend who called, or the ex-girlfriend who called Demonte the Uber. That was such a good thing that she called him the Uber, and I just hated that it was just like 3 seconds too late,
or like minutes too late.
Me and MD, we were talking about the police officers, how the judge, we didn't touch on this in the case, but the judge, when she handed down Queensha her sentencing, she talked about how she felt like the police officers could have done a better job. And maybe you feel like the police officers could have done better. But I challenge you to think about it from a different perspective. Because, we don't hesitate at all here on Murder in the Black to talk about how we think police officers can do better when we think that they can do better. But I challenge that perspective. I challenge that perspective only because I think that I listened to a podcast that I recommended you guys called What's Happening Now. And many people get on there and they share their perspectives in life events or surrounding different topics. But one police officer got on there and he was talking about how he responded to different domestic events, and how you have to become an expert on human behavior, and how oftentimes it's not as simple as just believing the woman or just simply believing the man. You have to become an expert on just watching human interactions and how you can respond to one domestic event and you believe the woman, right? And then you haul the man out, and then an hour later that woman brings him back in, and then you're responding to that same event, or vice versa, right? And so it's not as simple as the police hauling Demonte out and believing Queensha. Like, they had to really observe that event and respond to it accordingly. And so for them, they observed that one event, and they saw in that event that Queensha looked like she was the aggressor. And instead of just hauling her away, right, they said, hey, y'all go into the house and chill out. Like, that's what they did. That's what they felt like was the right thing to do. And they didn't immediately go. They stayed outside for a while and kind of still observed. They didn't immediately leave the scene. I just think that in this situation, it's not as simple as Queensha was wrong or Demonte was wrong. I think that Unfortunately, a life was lost, and I don't think Queensha turned her emotions. I was telling MD, I think she should have turned her emotions down. Do I think that's hard to do? I do. I think it's hard, but I think it's necessary when you have children. Okay, I think it's necessary when you have children that depend on you for the future. You got to turn your emotions down and turn that intellect all the way up. And so, do I think that makes her wrong? No, because we've all been in situations that probably could have been deadly had it not been for the Lord, had it not been for the Holy Spirit, had it not been for our family members that probably made us think twice. I just think it's unfortunate. You know what I'm saying? But I think that was a toxic situation for the both of them. And I think we tend to forget that we don't know what Demonte was thinking, because he dead. He not here to tell the story. We don't know what was going on in his thoughts and what was he thinking. And that's why I don't want to separate Demonte from this situation. I think it was a toxic situation for the both of them. I wish that it did not end this way. I wish that they could both be here to tell this story, as a cautionary tale for their children, So that's why I said I literally saw this story at 3 a.m. and called MD up and was like, girl, oh my gosh, have you heard the story? So MD, tell them what you think.
Well,
what was your initial thoughts?
I think I wrestled with this story because I do understand that crime is not black and white, and there are gray. There's a lot of gray, and luckily most cases you can find yourself on the black side or the white side. And I don't mean that in a racial way. I just mean like you can find yourself on one side where you're very clear on where you stand when it comes to that case. I know exactly where I stand. I know where the line is. I know what side I'm on. And whether you and I may disagree on the side, we can clearly see which side we want to be on and why we believe that way. This case just emphasized all the gray. It very literally highlighted where all the holes and all the gray lives. And it's not really clear to me when I watched this case and learned more about this case, what side I was on. And I wrestled with, was she justified in, or my first question was, did she intentionally shoot this guy? Then when I answered that question, which I feel like I did come to a conclusion that, yeah, I think she did. I think she intentionally shot this guy. Then it was she justified in shooting this guy? And that question was very difficult for me to come to an answer to. And I don't think that you're wrong if you disagree with me, because again, I think that it's so much gray here. And I think that I truly believe that I think that the jury actually got it wrong. I think the jury said that it was manslaughter. The jury said it wasn't intentional. It wasn't first degree. I think it was.
I do too.
I think she intentionally, with malice
and forethought,
went and grabbed that tire iron and grabbed that gun. And I think she went inside and she planned out how she was going to shoot this guy. I don't believe, in light of the facts that we know, how he texted this ex-girlfriend, and said, I'm trying to get out of here, send an Uber. I don't think he even approached her. I don't think that he, charged at her. I don't think that he was I think his back was turned to her. Because she hit him in the head with the tire iron before she shot him. And I don't think that if he was faced toward her, if he was facing her, he would not have been able to, I don't feel like she would have been able to get that hit off.
Yeah.
I think he would have been able to block it or move his head or I don't think she would have been able to hit his head. Mm-hmm. I think that she surprise attacked him. He turned around and was probably like, what? And then she shot him in the chest. And she told her child to go call 911, and she planned it. Because, see, everything else was already lined up in a row. She had already called the police and told them that she was in fear for her life. They already were there. She already said that I'm scared. She got text messages to show that he threatened her. She has witnesses to be able to testify that he beat her 2 weeks ago. She really thought that she was going to get away with this, but for the fact that she didn't understand the full totality of the law. I believe. Now, with that being said, do I think that because then you're probably like, MD, seriously, you don't think she was in fear for her life? I do think she was scared that this guy was going to beat her. I think she knew that when them police left, it was a good chance that either today, tomorrow, a week from now, he going to try to beat me. Because he's done it. I think she did fear that. But I do believe that she meticulously planned this thing out. She got her lick back. That's what I think. And I think both can be true. And I think that's one of the things that's hard for us in our human experience. It's hard for us to wrestle with both. She was in fear and she intentionally killed this guy. We want one or the other to be true, which is why the jury came back with what they came back with. And which is also why I was so irritated with the fact that the prosecution allowed his character evidence to come in, because I don't believe that the jury would have even voted in that way had the jury not known about his criminal record. The jury should never have even learned about that. But when the jury found out about that, when they knew that this guy was an abuser and he was a malicious guy and he wasn't the type of guy that you would root for.
Your poster victim.
Right. Then it's like, well, you know what? Maybe she was justified in shooting this guy. And even the judge, in my opinion, did that. Her bent was toward saying, yeah, you were found guilty. I can't reverse that. But, you shouldn't have to sit in jail. Because this guy, he was a whole criminal, and he probably did beat you, and he probably did beat other women, and he probably deserves that. And I'm saying all of that can be true, and he could not deserve to have been killed.
Yeah, because either we say people shouldn't be murdered or they shouldn't be murdered.
I mean, which were we lying? Which place are we laying? Where are we lying? Where is the line in the sand here? Where are we drawing it? And so for me, I do agree with you, Steph. I agree that like it was a toxic relationship and they should not have been together, and I wish that somebody had went the extra mile for them, even all the way back to the aunt. For the aunt to say, you know what, I'm gonna come pick the kids up. You just come to my house, I'm gonna go pick the kids up. Or even, you know what, let's ask uncle or cousin, a guy, to go pick the kids up, or whatever. We're gonna come with you. Or it's so many things that's like, man, if just one thing had been different here, this guy could have lived. And it wasn't, and it's so unfortunate. But I think we can both be sympathetic to the fact that she was abused, and that is horrific. I want to be clear that she did not deserve to be beat. She did not deserve to be slammed to the ground. She did not deserve to be verbally abused in the way that she was. And she did not deserve to have fear to go to her house. All of those things are true. And he deserved the opportunity to try to leave. And he was not afforded that opportunity because she decided to allow her emotions to rule the day.
Agreed.
And like Steph said, I mean, you know, that was our summary, but I don't think I have a takeaway necessarily. I think that's just, you know, really kind of where this case lies. And I'm really interested in what you guys think, because I really wrestled with this. And I think Billy did too. But it's like we said in the beginning, it's not a black and white case. It is a whole lot of gray here. And even if you land somewhere different than where Steph and I landed, I'm still very interested to hear where you land.
Oh yeah. So definitely curious to see what you guys think. Our poll question for today is, what aspect of the Queensha Johnson true crime case intrigues you the most? So the first option is the events leading up to the crime, the investigation and the evidence, the portrayal of the individuals involved, the impact of the community and the legal system, and 5, the potential lessons or societal implications. All right, the question of this episode that I want you guys to answer is that since Queensha was able to stay out on her appeal bond, MD and I were talking, and I believe that there is a bias within the justice system with women. And I believe that women tend to have a bias as it relates to the sentencing that they sometimes get. So I want to ask you guys, do you believe that there is a bias with women in the justice system? Yes or no? And then overall, just tell me what you guys think about this episode. Now, you know what I'm going to say. Share if you care this episode with friends and family. And if you were lucky, this week on Tuesday, I absolutely did release a subscriber paid subscription episode. And there was a chink in the system, a glitch in the system, however you want to say it, and y'all got some access to it. Let me tell you, y'all ran it up, honey. But we actually got some people that subscribed with that content that I actually released on accident. So hey, that was just y'all's free bonus episode that y'all got a preview to. Okay, so make sure that y'all become a paid subscriber and get some bonus content from Murder in the Black. Share if you care this episode with friends and family. I hope you guys had a time with this twist in a tail, or a tail in the twist, however I said it at the beginning of the episode. I'm old, I'm forgetting stuff, but I hope y'all enjoyed this episode, and I love you. Bye. See you next week.